Hey guys, welcome to Conversations with John Thomas. This is my friend Tony Kim, who is pastoring Renaissance Church.
Renaissance, that's right.
Renaissance.
Yeah.
So you do the American pronunciation instead of the proper Renaissance.
Well, the Renaissance, we could do that too.
We could do.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and is working with HIM.
That's correct.
With Cheon and that group there.
Just stepped into my new role as HIM, the U.S. National Director recently.
Wow. He's only got a few things going because he's also on the board of Streams Ministries, which is also a new role.
That's right.
Well.
That's right.
So,
which is a real privilege for me to serve and build with you guys here.
Yeah. Glad you're
It's awesome.
So I wanted to just kind of give an opportunity because a lot of people that have been following Streams of what we're doing probably don't know a lot about you. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your testimony. How'd you find the Lord? Or how did he find you?
Right.
And then what's been some of this journey as you've been stepping into his plan for your life?
Yeah. Well, going back, my parents are immigrants, obviously from Asia. My father, I just found out, was a Hiroshima bomb survivor. Wow. He was born in Hiroshima, and his family was moved there from Korea during the Japanese occupation, to work in different, camps and just as laborers. And my mom's family was migrating from near the northern side of Korea down south during the war. And through all that journey, there was just a lot of chaos, a lot of just hardship. And my parents came together through an arranged marriage. How many
hear about that very often. Yeah, that's.
And so through that, they came to the States, landed in California. And then obviously I was born, the greatest blessing of their life, and the greatest gift ever. Yes. Or the greatest curse. It could be too.
One or the other. A little bit of both.
But just growing up, we just had a lot of, because of their backgrounds, just a lot of addiction. But in terms of faith, there was Buddhism at the center along with Shintoism. Okay. And so we had those two religions kind of mixed together. And so growing up, we would go to the cemeteries and do our ancestral, worship. Some of the ancestors come to eat, because we would go to the tombstone, lay food around the tombstone. And, they teach us how to bow down and summon the ancestral spirits to come and eat and all these things. And me, I'm a total foodie, right? Some things never change. And so while they were doing that, I would be one that just go and I just start eating the food. And it's just, I would just start eating and my mom would just grab and go, "What are you doing? That's for your ancestors." I'm going, I'm like, "You guys are crazy." We would do all the rituals, bow down 3 times and, and do some Asian chant or whatever. And they would say, "Yeah, they came and ate, let's go." And they'd gather the food and I'd be the one always asking the questions.
Why is the food still here?
Yeah, exactly. I'd say, "Who came and ate?" The only people that came and ate was me. What are y'all talking about? And so they said, "Don't ask questions." And so I was that one that would just go completely against the grain of our Asian culture, the Korean culture, which is, speak when you're spoken to, otherwise stay silent, and so then during that time, my mom got really ill. And, the doctor's going to figure out what was going on. And so finally, one of her friends just said, "Hey, you need to come to this meeting with me." And so out of desperation, my mom just said, "Okay." Ended up being this revival service. Wow. And the late 70s, early 80s, the Korean church in North America experienced a great awakening. It was a massive wave of revival. And through the ministry of Dr. Youngie Cho. Okay. When he came across the U.S., because the Lord spoke to him about a great revival. And so it was the birthings of just this whole prayer movement, this fire of intercession and things. And so my mom goes there. She took my brother and I have a younger brother and younger sister. My sister wasn't born yet. So we were there, and it was mayhem. It was crazy. People were lifting their hand. They were crying. They were weeping. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, let's get the heck out of here. I was like 4, 5, 6 years old.
Wow.
At the time. And after he was done ministering, it was a boring sermon because I didn't understand anything really. And he just started ministering, and he just said, there's someone here in this building, I think he pointed out to the right side. He said, there's only, you have this condition, and the Holy Spirit's healing you right now. And when that happened, the fire of God went through my mom's body. She got instantly healed. And then she gave her life to Jesus. And that began our journey as, and as followers of Christ for my mom. She was the first Christian in our family history and lineage. And so from there, she started taking us to this boring place called church. Right. And in that, there was a lot of, just a lot of spiritual conflict, because now my mom's a Christian and here's my family who are Buddhists mainly. And so that created a lot of just spiritually speaking power encounters and just that, chaos. And so meanwhile, there's just a lot of addiction, a lot of just abuse in the family. And, just because of the upbringing, all the parents, my parents did the best they could to raise us, but in that process, I became very angry. I started dabbling in drugs and alcohol and running around with gangs at a very young age. And by the time I was in 7th grade, still going to church, memorizing the scriptures because they gave out prizes. We didn't have much growing up. Exactly. So I was very competitive, as you know.
No.
I know. I'm actually very humble. It's my greatest gift, and I love to exercise it. And I'm very proud of it. Right. So I was just running around, just the streets, not doing just not good things, just violent, angry. And finally 7th grade came and I knew everything, and
of course,
And so I told my mom, I said, you know what? God is fake. Church is fake. I'm done. I'm not going to go anymore. I said, I'm just going to live my life the way I'm going to live. And that's it. And so, mom always knows, the way into a son's heart, right? And so she said, well, I'll give you money each week to go to church. She knew I was driven by money, right? I'm Korean. I'm Asian. We love business. We love money, right? And so she said, I'll give you $3 a week to go to church. I was like, okay, done deal.
$3 a week.
$3 a week got me to church. Which was a huge deal for our family because we were dumpster diving for food 3-4 days a week just to put food on the table, literally. Okay. And so she made that sacrifice. And on top of that, I was getting bonuses each week. Tithes. And I would pocket that. And she's like, here, you this, and here's, and so I would just pocket all this, and here's my way into retirement by the age of 30, which was my goal. And so I'm getting paid to go to church at this point, and I'm just rolling in the dough. And during that time, 8th grade comes, and literally my mom's praying, I pray that he doesn't drop out of school. While most Asian families are praying, they better get into Ivy League university, right? They're just like, as long as he stays in school, that'd be awesome. Wow. Right. A lot of my family members, they're looking at the different universities and Ivy Leagues, and they're looking at me going, just get into community college. Right. Me not knowing anyone could get in. Right. Yeah. And so the 8th grade comes, I graduate, which is a miracle. And my mom comes to me and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you a gift. And I was jazzed because we didn't have much. So then she says, yeah, your gift is you're going to youth camp with church. But I'm like, Mom, you always said, every year she sends me to youth camp. I'm like, this isn't a gift, it's a curse. That's what I told her. I said, this is a curse, me with being with all these fake people. And so she's like, I paid for it, you're going to go. So I ended up going, and that's where things began happening. Went to a place called Prayer Mountain up in Mount Hermon. And what you do at Prayer Mountain in California, in Santa Cruz Mountains, right? Okay. And so you know what you do at Prayer Mountain?
You pray.
You pray. Yeah. And fast.
Oh, so now you can't eat.
Now I can't eat.
You're really enjoying this youth camp.
Yeah, I'm going, this sucks. Right? And so we get there, and this is a schedule. It's like get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, pray for 2 hours, get ready, go to the kitchen, drink our breakfast, have morning service, have group time, and then go to the kitchen, drink our lunch. After that, we have a little bit of free time. But free time was not free time They're like, you could pray anywhere you want at Prayer Mountain for 3 hours. I'm like, that's not free time. That's bondage. Right. And then after that, we come back together, get in group time, go to the kitchen, drink our dinner, have service, and pray another 2 hours before we go to bed. That was the agenda.
Wow.
This was junior hires.
Wow.
Right. And so I don't know if that was spirituality or spiritual abuse. Right. So I'm looking at the schedule and they're going through it when we got there, and I'm fuming. And I'm like, I'm here at a prayer and fasting retreat. And at that point, I'm my own God. You know, there's no other God besides me.
Right.
That's my mentality, literally. And I would literally pray, you know, even in my own name. I wouldn't say in Jesus' name. If they asked me to pray at church, I say in my own name, Tony, I pray amen. You know, and they stopped asking me to pray. They stopped asking me to do anything because it would always be about me. And so then that first day's over. I'm totally emaciated, malnutrition. You know, there's no food. I mean, it's crazy. You know, I'm starving. Right? People are like, yeah, you know, I think I had a vision. I'm like, I had a vision. They're like, finally, Tony had an encounter. And I said,
I saw cheeseburgers.
I did. I was like, I want cheeseburgers. Give me food, you know? And so I go to bed that night, wake up with a nightmare. And I had night torments, terrors all my life, you know? And I would wake up with scratches on my body, literal physical, just marks. And so I went to my youth pastor. I said, I had a nightmare last night. He said, oh, did you have another, you know, was there another demon chasing you or whatever? And I was like, no. He said, what was it? And I looked at him and I said, I was preaching. I had a Bible in my hand in the dream and I was preaching. And he goes, I knew it. I knew you were called. There's a calling. And I looked at him. I said, you better shut up, man. And so then, you know, he just kind of walked away. And I thought, this is my worst. I said, I will never preach the gospel. I said, over my dead, but I will never, this whole thing's fake and real, unreal. You know, I said, this is nuh-uh. You know, I'm going to be rich and maybe die in my mid to late 20s, the way I'm living. And so from there, the next day we go through the same thing. Before we go to bed, I just said one thing. I said, okay, God, if you're real, I couldn't shake the dream the whole day. And I said, if you're real, I said, I dare you to give me another dream. And I went to bed. And be careful for what you ask for.
Yeah.
Right. And so I woke up with another dream, but it was a progressive dream from the night before. And in this dream, I was preaching, but it was in a stadium. And people were walking out of wheelchairs. They're throwing crutches on the stage. And people were running forward, responding to the gospel message. And I woke up and I thought, no. My first thought was, I'm going to be poor my entire life. I'm going to end up living like my youth pastor. Right? So I went to him again. I said, I had another dream and I told him about it. He said, Tony, God is on you. God is after you. And I said, I don't care. I'm not going to preach. And I said, I'm not going to live like you. I said, you don't even drive a car that works. You live in a house so small I could put it in my pocket. You know, and I said, look at the way you're living. I don't want to live like you. And he just kept saying, you're called. You're called. And so that next, you know, that same day in the afternoon during the free time, you know, again, I can't shake these dreams. It's haunting me, literally. Yeah. You know, it's a day tears, right, from heaven. You know, that's a good title, Day Tears from Heaven.
Yes.
Right. And so finally, during the afternoon, I just walked into one of the prayer rooms at the Prayer Mountain. And I just sat down. My friend was there in the room. I saw him. I just sat down under a picture of Jesus praying. And I just said, okay, God, if you're real, let's talk. I said, if you're real, why are all these things happening in my life? Why all the abuse? Why all the struggles? Why all the hardships? Why are my parents going through what they're going through and all these things? And I said, if you're real, I said, why don't I see anything from the Bible that I memorize, that I read about? There's no power in this thing. I said, it's nothing but a book. And so I just start having this real heart to heart, just desiring to see if God is real. And I just said, if you're real, God, I said, I'm done hearing about you. No more boring sermon, no more boring church, none of this. I said, if you're real, I don't want to hear about you, talk about you, hear about you. I want to see you. I said, that's the only way I'll follow you, is that if I see you. And I said, you did it, to Saul on the road to Damascus, and I said, Saul was on his way to murder people, and there were some people in the youth group I had strategy on murdering. That's how angry I was, and so the crew that I was running around with and stuff, I was talking to them about, how to take their life, and not get caught. And so that was very real to me. Whether I would have done it or not, I don't know, but that was in the works. And I just said, I need to see you. And so when I said this, all of a sudden, the only way I could describe it is the room I was in melted like wax, and a greater reality appeared, and I was in a different realm. It wasn't a mind's eye vision. It was not a vision. It wasn't a picture. It was literally me looking at you. The room changed. Wow. I saw the walls just melt like wax. And all of a sudden, here's this man from a little distance, a silhouette of a light, start walking towards me. And I realized God is real. This is as real as anything I've ever felt. Yeah. I've ever seen. And he started walking towards me. And the first thought I had was, he's going to kill me. Because, that was the perception of God that I had, right? It was all works-based. It was all performance-based, and so I thought, I'm dead. And so I just fell on my face, but all I could do was just weep. And I just wept, on my face. And for the first time, again, I didn't have language or anything. It was a conservative church, so we didn't talk about experiences with God this way. And I'm experiencing this, and all of a sudden, he starts speaking to me without words. Mm-hmm. And I realized you could talk without words in this realm. It's spirit to spirit. It's spirit to spirit communication. Yeah. Right. And again, I didn't have this language back then, and he just says, stand up, spirit to spirit, and look into my eyes. And I'm scared to death. Right. But all I could feel is the closer he got to me was fear was dissipating. Anger was dissipating. And all I could feel was just his love. That was it. That was the only thing I felt, was just love. And I felt this presence and this love. That's all I could say. It was just love. And I stood up, looked into his eyes, and he had like glass blue eyes. It was glassy, and when you looked into his eyes, it was like eternity was set in his eyes of everlasting love, and the only way I could describe that is it's like the sea of glass for eternity, right? On a bed of just this beautiful blue glaze, and when I looked into his eyes, instantly I was transformed forever. I felt different. I saw different. It was just just one glimpse of his eyes, so for me, my goal, just as a follower of Christ now, is not to minister to people. It's just to help people look into the eyes of Jesus. And if we could do that, come on, everything, that's all we need. It's just one look in his eyes, right? And so from there, he just said, follow me, as I was looking into his eyes. And this is me crazy. I said, I'll follow you on one condition. I started negotiating with God. I'm negotiating with God, right? And so as I started negotiating with him, this is what I said. I said, God, I don't want to be a pastor that, or a leader that just leads a church on a corner of a street. I said, that's good. I said, 4,000 or 5,000 people in a church. The church we were going to was a mega church. It was a good size. I said, I don't want to just lead a church. I said, if I'm going to follow you, would you use me like the Apostle Paul? I want to change the world for you. Yeah. And I literally asked him, I said, can I change the world for you? If I'm going to follow you. Yes. And I just felt this resounding yes. And I felt like he put that in my heart. Yeah. That was his desire in my heart that I picked up, that I stated back to him.
Yeah.
I just felt this resounding yes. And he smiled, and I came out of that experience just wrecked. I was vibrating, never felt anything like I was vibrating. I was shaking. I don't know what was going on. I could feel it right now,
Yeah.
and I came out of that room, but it was funny because I must have keeled over or something, because when I came out of that experience, my friend goes, "You okay?" I said, "Why?" He goes, "You fell over and you were out." I was like, "Yeah." I said, I met God. I said, "God's real." So I came out of that room to go find my youth pastor, and he looked at me and he goes, "You met God?" I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" He goes, "You're glowing." He goes, "Your face looks different. You look different."
Yeah.
And I shared with him a little bit of the experience. I didn't share with him because I thought this whole thing was crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so that evening was a final service, gathering before we went home the next day. And during the service, he comes to me and says, "Hey, come here." He says, why don't you come pray for this girl?" Pulls me up to this girl in a wheelchair. He goes, "You had a dream that people walking out of a wheelchair. You just met Jesus." He said, "Let's see what happens." And I said, "Well, how do you pray for people like this?" And he said, "Just put your hand on her and just say, in the name of Jesus, stand up." So I just said those words, "In the name of Jesus, stand up." And from there, this energy left my body. And I felt it was like the virtue of heaven, the power of God. The spark left my hand.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden she stood up and started walking.
Come on.
And I thought, this is what Jesus is all about.
Yeah.
This
is real.
This is real.
Yes.
And from there we went home, and I just started having experience after experience after experience. I didn't eat for another 2 weeks because I lost my appetite. I was just so full with God, and I would just have these different experiences. And during my worship, I would have squirrels come to my windowsill, birds come land on my windowsill, and it was just bizarre to me, And from there, one night I was electrified just in His presence, So I went to the kitchen, turned on the light, and basically, I was freaked out. I just grabbed a glass to get a cup of water. And when I picked up the glass, it exploded in my hands. And then I heard a voice. And the voice said, "Tony, you're part of a generation that I'm raising up to demonstrate power, but marked with my intimacy."
Say that again.
He said, "You're part of a generation that's going to demonstrate power, but marked with intimacy."
Yes.
And I was 13 years old at the time. I didn't understand what that meant. And I thought, I'm crazy now. I'm hearing voices. What is going on? It wasn't audible, but it was such a clear internal voice.
Yeah.
It was so clear with so much clarity. I thought, what is this? And that began my journey of just a pursuit to know Jesus. And it took me a while to get out of the relationship with gangs and running with the crews and things like that. But, God opened up doors for me to get out.
Yeah.
And so that began my journey with Jesus and the pursuit of my knowledge of knowing who He is.
Man, I have not heard that whole story before. And you've mentioned that you had this encounter, but dude, that is astounding.
Yeah.
That is astounding. I love how you've got dreams, you've got trances, you got visions, you've got encounters. Like so many times we take these things, we separate them out. They're individual little categories. Mm-hmm. But the reality is it's just meeting with God. Yeah. All of those different, the internal voice, the power, the girl coming out of the wheelchair, the trance that you went into, or you went into this other realm. Like all of that, I mean, that's the type of stuff that happens when you meet God. Yeah. Because God is all of that.
Right. Exactly. I think, and so many of us today, we go after the experiential aspect of things. Right. The trances, the dreams, the visions, the supernatural, and I love all those things. We love all those things, right? But those are derivatives of knowing
Yes.
Christ. You know, the epignosis, the experiential knowledge of Christ. You know, is to know him, and then all these things are just byproducts of knowing Jesus. And no matter what, I think it's important to say, and I think it's important for people to understand, you know, the person watching to understand that, you know, the dramatic experience is not the power or transformation. It's the one it leads us to.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
it's Jesus.
Yeah.
It's not my dreams how it's powerful. It's not my, you know, it's not the experience of whatever realm I was a part of. Because without Jesus, those things mean nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's so important that the supernatural, we have to bring the Christ back into the centrality, you know, of our walk with him, which is really not about the supernatural, but it's about Christ.
It is.
You know, and in our natural state, that the supernatural takes place. You know, because the supernatural doesn't flow in the supernatural. The supernatural actually flows on the natural.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think the more we embrace our humanity and our walk with Christ from that perspective, then everything else happens.
It just becomes part of the package, because you're part of a generation that will transform the world with my power through intimacy.
That's right.
And then that piece of intimacy, I mean, that's the key. Because, I mean, I know you have, but I know I've met people that have astounding power.
Yeah.
But they don't know God.
Right.
They have no relationship with him. You can get the power and miss him, but you can't really get him and miss the power.
That's right. That's right.
And if we make it about that intimacy, because that's what we've missed in one side of the church, we make it about information outside of intimacy, and it becomes dead. And another side of the church, we make it about power outside of intimacy, and it just becomes chaos.
Right.
But either side, if it is infused with the intimacy, with the person of Jesus Christ, with who God really is, it takes information, it takes knowledge, and it makes it alive, so it's transformational. It takes power so that it actually forms someone into the image of Christ, and they're actually bringing heaven to earth. Either side, when we get intimacy, it brings it together so that we bring the transformation that we're intended to. Because that's what we're here for. We're here to transform the world. He started the restoration of all things. And we are a part of that. We're first fruits of it in a way. And yet we are the initiators, the instigators of continued restoration.
Right. That's so good, because, you know, I think the fruit of, you know, generally speaking, the church today, you know, we're not seeing the transformative aspect of the gospel. Is because we have a bunch of people, you know, we're moving with power without intimacy. Power doesn't mean transformation. You know, it's Christ, you know. And so I know a couple of years ago I had a dream on Yom Kippur, you know, and it was all about the Lord basically saying, I'm bringing my people into a greater glory. But he said, I need my people to step not only in power, but into authority. And we're a generation that's called to demonstrate power and walk in authority.
Yes.
You know, and we're missing that authoritative part, you know, because power comes through giftings, you know, but authority comes from actually our intimacy and relationship with God. You know, we could impart power, but you can't impart authority, because authority is delegated. And that comes with, you know, the Christ-like character and the nature. I like to call it the face of God. You know, that we need to be a generation before the face of God, to look into his eyes, you know, where authority is derived from.
Yeah, that phrase, walk with me, you know, Abraham, you know, walk before me, walk with me. It literally means walk in front of my face.
Yes. Yeah.
To literally be one who is constantly walking with the face of God in front of us. That's what it means to be a friend of God. That's what it means to be one that knows him. Is to constantly have that as the core, as the energy, as the alpha and the omega, as the starting point and the goal of everything. It's all about knowing him. Because he is the perfect expression that everything
Yeah.
is moving towards.
Yeah.
All of creation is echoes of him that
That's
will
right.
resolve itself into a picture of him so that everybody can see him.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to be a part of bringing that dissonance into connection so that he is known, he is seen.
Right. That's so good.
Uh,
Yeah. And it's that, again,
man.
it's that experiencing God, knowing him from experience, not just intellectually.
Right.
It's going, like you said, from information to impartation, where information you receive through your brain,
Right.
where impartation comes
in
into
the
your spirit,
Yeah.
and I think we're in a season right now. I believe God is inviting us into new encounters, where he's inviting us into deeper places,
Yeah.
where he's taking us from glory to glory, not just situationally, but in terms of our own personal transformation.
Yeah.
Where through that we could express and we could create the world that he's creating within us, as we get deeper with him.
Yeah. Dude, there is so much at stake
Mm-hmm.
in our relationship with him. Like he's actually made himself vulnerable and put his plan into our hands and said, here, I trust you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't do that. I would not trust me. I wouldn't trust you in that way.
Thanks.
But I trust God in you.
No, totally.
No,
totally.
but outside of that, but he's said, I'm actually, this is my plan. This is how I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can see this kid that's angry, but the anger is actually fear.
Mm-hmm.
I can see this kid that's rebellious, but the rebellion is actually offense that hasn't been resolved. And I can see that this is one that I can trust to be a king in my kingdom. And so I'm going to come and meet with him, and I'm going to give him that authority so that he can rule and reign and bring my people into the experience that I intended them to be.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. No, it's so good. And I think it's imperative for us to understand that it's not just the experience itself either. Yeah. Because I love Revelation 4, right? Because I use that as a gateway of encounter for me, right? How John, he experienced there's a door, that opens to come up here. So many of us would stop right there. I heard God, and just stay there. But he pressed in. And he saw the 24 angels or 24 elders, the angels around the throne. And then it says, and I see him. Yes. And so often we stop in the middle of our experience enamored. And it's amazing, right?
Right.
Like angelic encounters, trances, visions, dreams, and all. But we have to keep pressing in until we see him. Yeah. It's his face. Yeah. And so I know so many people that come and they say, I had this encounter, I had an angel. And I said, but did you see Jesus? Because all these, the angelic encounter is another door for you to go through to encounter him,
to get to him,
to the King of Kings.
It's almost a distraction.
It is.
It's like the Elijah and the Elisha.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, the chariots and the fire, the angels. That was the distraction. Mm-hmm. Can you look past all the activity and keep your eyes on the one that you're following?
That's right.
Because if you can do that, then you will actually receive authority.
Yeah.
If not, you'll have a great story.
Yeah. And so, exactly. No, that's right. We may receive a level of impartation of power, but I really believe that God is inviting us in to not only move in power, but for us to literally transform cities and disciple nations.
Yes.
And we have to see the face of Jesus to receive that level of authority, because biblically speaking, every place of encounter within people and within cities, the places of encounter have changed identities and names.
Yes.
Right? Like Abram was turned into Abraham when he had his encounter. Sarai turned into Sarah when she had her encounter. Jacob has turned into Israel when he had his encounter. Yeah. But not only that, I think there's a picture of Jacob where he literally, he was in a city called Luz, right? It's known for its almond trees, for a bunch of nuts. We know a lot of cities that's known for a bunch of nuts, right? But he has this encounter there, right? He has this dream where the ladder drops, angels are ascending and descending, right? I think it's in Genesis 28, right? Verses 10 to 22 or something. But from that place, he wakes up and he says, God's moving here, and I didn't even know it, right? There's an increase of awareness of who he is, through encounter. And then he says, I'm in Luz, but I'm going to change it. This place is now called Bethel, the house of God, because I met God here. He changed the name of the city, and then when he wrestled with the angel, right, he had that encounter. Once he realized he was wrestling with the angel of the Lord, God, right, he's like, I'm not going to let you go until I get the blessing. He gets the blessing, and he comes out, and he says, I'm renaming the city Peniel, the face of God, right? And so when we see his face, we could change the face of cities.
Yes.
And that's the transformative authority that I believe he is inviting us into. And he's saying, can you not get distracted with everything, but can you just come a little closer, see my face?
Yeah.
It's the face of God.
Come on. That's so good, man. That's so good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Man, so
thank
good.
you for sharing your story and for sharing your passion.
Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Guys, thanks for joining us for this conversation. Make sure you check out Tony's website. You'll see it on the screen, and we'll see you guys for our next conversation. Bless you.